Well, hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to the Impactus Young Man's Podcast. Today, I am so stoked about our next guest. We've got Adrian Monte, who leads the Men of Bedrock community. In their coaching program for men, they help men develop habits so that they can find consistency and permanence in their life. I don't know about you, but oftentimes it's easy to start and stop and have a vision for life that you know God may be calling you into, but it's just hard to get where you want to go. Well, today, Adrian and I talk about a number of things. We talk about the change in the fathering landscape from the generations before us to what we're experiencing now. We talk about some of the struggles that guys face when it comes to building a community of men around them, and 3 key habits that every guy should consider doing now. That and so much more on today's podcast. So let's jump right in. Well, hey, Adrian, thanks so much for joining me, man. It's great to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks, Jordan. This is going to be great.
Yeah, man, it's funny. Our paths have crossed fairly recently. I came across you and the community of men that you have on Instagram there. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are? You're a teacher, but also you're leading this men's community.
Yeah.
Tell us about Adrian.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me again. The name of our coaching program is Bedrock, and what we do is we help men install habits that allow them to achieve consistency and permanence in their life. We've seen so many programs online that help you get started. And what we always imagined in our program was installing a system so that we wouldn't be looking at your after photo. We'd be looking at your after the after photo, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
So teach you sort of a system that will work permanently to avoid some of that like starts and stops. That's why we called the program Bedrock, right? It's like a permanent type of rock. And so, yeah, that's what I do this past year. My brother and I started the online coaching program. We've had just so many great men come through, dads, single guys, but always men who wanted to do better for their families. In addition, I am a full-time teacher as well, full-time English teacher. Wow. And I got 3 kids, 3 young sons, 6, 8, 10. And of course, I'm sure we'll get into it, but my marriage is my claim to fame with my wife, Amy. So those are all the things.
Come on.
Those are all the things.
Amazing, man. Thanks. You know, it's interesting, Adrian. Right now, there's a ton of content online geared towards men and dads in particular. It seems like right now it just seems to be taking off. I just saw actually a quote online from a study, I think it was done a few years ago, that like dads are now spending 3 times the amount of time with their kids than their own fathers did. And I think the stats said that something along the lines, and I'll pull it up, I'll put it in the show notes, but 3% of dads in the 80s, I believe, said they had changed a diaper, but now it's like risen to like way, way higher. And so are you seeing an appetite in men to kind of lead that consistent life of, you know, actually being great husbands and dads?
Yeah, I am. Yes. And sadly, I think some of it is actually political. It's a bit like, you know, like, I don't know, there's a little bit of politics behind it, but I think the bigger piece is that men are realizing what they missed out on, right? Yeah. I think for my grandfather, let's go back 2 generations, they were told, here's what a man does: go to work, bring home a paycheck, and provide for your family. Like, work hard. That's what my Italian grandfather, like, work hard. That's it. Like, it wasn't on their list, so to speak, to play with your kids at the park, to take your kids on vacations, to be like a fit dad. It was predominantly, I'm not saying only, but it was predominantly provide for your family. And I think a lot of that, especially when immigration happened after the Second War, that was the point. Like, the point was not come here and be happy. The point was come here and make a better life. And that was equated with financial security, things they did not have when they left wherever they came from. My grandparents came from Italy, right? And so the immigration led to this, like, what I will do for my family is work hard so they don't have to experience communism, for example, right? Like, that's what it was. Then I think I look at my father, one generation. My father was a step forward. He was an engaged dad. He like came to our events. He was there watching us. I think this next generation, our generation, Jordan, are dads who are saying, wait a minute, we want to be connected with our kids. What did we miss out? I don't want to just be a one-dimensional man who works. I want to actually be involved in the upbringing of my kids at home. Now, what that's led to, I wouldn't say it's been easy, because as women have started working more outside the home and men are now asking for more involvement inside the home, I think you have to be real clear in your own family unit who does what. And some of those like gender roles, what we would say, require conversation. Otherwise, it turns into like, it can resort back to the women are now working, but then they're also feeling the burden of taking care of the kids as well. And so I think husbands and wives or couples in partnerships have to be real clear on, okay, who does what in this relationship? Because I think men want to be in the house more and women rightfully are outside the house. And so those conversations are really important for a healthy family unit. Hope that answered the question.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think I'm seeing the same thing. I have friends who, she was a stay-at-home mom, and the husband would come home and he would like have to go mow the lawn, and she's still inside with the kids. And she thought, man, it almost is like he gets to work and then be away from the kids, come home and still be away from the kids. And so she ended up mowing the lawn. That was the agreement that they had made. And so it's just an example of what you're seeing. I would say this, that's what I see as well, man, is my dad was really engaged, but even more so now, you know, when my mom comes to visit, she'll say, man, you and your brother, like you guys are really leaning into this fatherhood and husbanding thing. And it's great stuff. At the same time, what's important is that guys have a healthy voice that they're listening to, because it can get as helpful as it is, sometimes it can get, like you said, there's this political or toxic side that we can see.
Yeah.
You know, Adrian, I'd love to just pick your brains. There's a common quote Tony Robbins has said, you know, change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of changing. And I'm sure you've heard that 1,000 times, but I'm curious about your own story. But I'm also curious about the men that you work with. Is this something that you see that oftentimes there's a catalyst, like of just a painful wall that they have to run into?
It can be. Yeah, it certainly can be. You can certainly get to like a rock bottom moment where my story's not this necessarily of like, I looked in the mirror one day and I was dissatisfied. My story is actually living with discipline. I've always just lived with discipline. My background is I was a competitive runner, and literally, if I wasn't disciplined with my training, I would get left behind. Like I have nightmares of like literally the guys in the race running away from me and I couldn't keep up. So discipline to me has always been an essential to be successful. So I do think some guys will come to a moment where they experience like a rock bottom moment. Like their wife says something to them, or they get fired from work, or they just can't keep up with their life and they're totally dissatisfied. I think other guys get a vision of the future. So rather than being dissatisfied with the present, they get a better vision for the future. I'm a person of faith, and one of the passages in the Bible I really like is, without vision, the people perish. I really like that, right? And so I think some guys, like we were just talking about with dads, they get a vision of what their family could be like, and that drives them more than, Jordan, one thing I can say is like, look at your kids. They hate you. They never want to hang out with you. Like your wife is like hiding from you. Look at your body. Aren't you embarrassed by those 30? I could do that. I'm like that gym coach who's like shaming kids who can't climb the rope. We never did this in Ontario, but you see it in movies, right?
Yeah.
Right. Or what I can be is the coach that comes alongside and says, imagine what it would be like if when you came home, your kids ran to you and you had the body, you had the energy to take them to the park to play. Imagine what it would be like if each night when you reached for your wife before bed, she reached back. Imagine that. And I think when you can give guys a better vision of the future, that drives them. I do think rock bottom moments can drive people. Some guys don't have those. Some guys are just like, they're doing pretty well. Like they're like, like things are good. Nothing's terrible. Like I'm not addicted to anything. And so they'd be tempted to settle for mediocrity and just be, the trap of average and just be like, yeah, this is good. Like this is good. So I think to move guys like that, they don't need a rock bottom moment because they're already pretty happy. But instead, if you can paint a picture of, imagine what it would be like. Imagine what they'll say about you at your funeral. If you can go that far, one of the activities we have the guys in our group do is write your own eulogy. Like, write your own eulogy.
I've done that. Yeah.
You've done it, eh? Yeah, it comes from Donald Miller. Full credit to Donald Miller. That's where I got the idea from. And imagine what they would say about you in your future. Could that drive you? Would that potential of where you could be, let's say 50, 60, 70 years from now, could that drive you forward? So yeah, rock bottom moments work. I also think mountaintop visions work as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm so glad you said that, because I think oftentimes when it comes to men, we make there's this like desire to make guys feel super crappy about their current situation. And you don't need to tell guys that their situation's not all that it could be.
No,
you know
you
what I mean?
don't.
Guys know the areas that they could be doing better, but like pointing them to that greater vision, to me, that was the biggest change in my journey. And a short story of my journey is kind of like start, stop, get really excited about an idea only to have the, fail and then try again. But when I started to understand, actually look forward to a vision, it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to do this 90-day challenge and then I'm better. It's this lifestyle pointing my family towards a direction that I want to go to. You mentioned, the coach that's climbing the rope and shaming, the students. My experience in the short time that I've been working with men is that shaming men to change rarely works.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, in the long term. Yeah.
Well, because what shame does, and I like how Brene Brown talks about the difference between shame and guilt, right? So imagine, imagine you got drunk one night and showed up late for work. What shame feels like is, oh my God, I'm such a failure. I can never get this right. I'm always late. I'm always doing this thing. I'm always starting and stopping. That's what shame sounds like.
Yeah.
What guilt sounds like is, that was stupid. That decision I made was dumb. Dang it. I had one beer. I was enjoying myself. I knew I should not have had the second. Dang it. Next time, I'll have maybe an accountability system, or I'll have a reverse alarm set on my phone. I'll make a different choice, so that it's then guilt. Guilt can drive you to change your behavior. What shame does is makes you feel like a piece of what, right? And so that does not last. It's like that gym coach screaming at you to get up the rope. You'll probably get up the rope while he's screaming, but when he's not there, then you've just got this rope to climb and you have no motivation to do it. Versus if the coach had taught you the skills to climb that rope, then when he's not there, you are fully equipped to deal with it. And I think shame and guilt can be powerful, right? Like if I feel guilt that I yelled at my kids, that's good. I'll change my behavior. If I feel shame that I'm a crappy dad who never can do anything right, then I'll probably cope by eating more, drinking more, staying up late, watching porn, like doing all those things. It's the same action, but one is, one is shame, one is guilt. I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah, it is a good distinction, because I think guilt is saying that choice that I made was wrong. Shame says I am inherently wrong because of what I've done.
Yeah.
And I see so many guys that get stuck in the cycle of shame, right? Rather than the cycle of like affirmation and knowing their identity. And it's just such a key distinction to make.
Yeah. And I grew up, Jordan, I grew up in the church, and I love all my friends are guys who I met during my young what would they call it? College and careers, like, in the university years. Those are all my closest friends today, the guys who will be with me to my funeral. So those are core friendships. But one of the things we've talked about as we've moved further in our lives into our 30s and 40s is the messaging we often heard on Sunday mornings was made us feel ashamed. It was more about shame than guilt that we had done something bad. When I think back on it, I felt bad as a person. I felt like I was, and whether it was whether I internalized that for myself or whether they said it directly from the stage, I always felt like there was something wrong with me versus like there was something wrong with what I did. And so, people will have different experiences growing up, depending on your parents, depending on the community you grew up in, depending on if you went to church or didn't go to church, those things. And so I think it's important for guys to figure out, how do you talk to yourself? Do you shame yourself? Or do you say, dang it, like, I ate a Big Mac. That doesn't mean I'm a lazy, bad person. It just means I probably didn't prep my meals properly the night before. And that's a very big difference.
I've said things to myself that I would never whisper to another human. You know what I mean? Like you catch yourself, if you just listen to the words you say to yourself over the smallest things, it's like, where is this shame narrative coming from? And there's a guy I've been reading recently called Dr. Kurt Thompson, and he's got a lot of cool things to talk about the role of shame in a man and a woman's life. But it's just a really great resource for, especially as you work with men. I would encourage you to give it a read. Adrian, you often talk about habits in your program, the Men of Bedrock. Talk to me why habits are so integral to a guy that maybe wants to live that consistent life. Can you just repeat exactly what you said at the beginning? Men of Bedrock are to build consistent, and there was another word you had mentioned. Permanent. Yeah, permanent. That's
so habits. The reason you need habits is because your motivation will fail. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, let me ask you, how many guys, actually, I don't have to ask, like, why is the gym empty by February? Right? Yeah. Why do so many guys, this was my story. I grew up trying to read the Bible in a year and ending about the 6th book. You know, because your motivation fails. Like, how many guys have gotten to the end of those first 5 books and been like, oh my God, like your motivation will fail. And so what you need is habits. I like how James Clear says it. One of my favorite books, Atomic Habits by James Clear, says, we don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. Right. And systems are the things you put in place that don't depend on your willpower or motivation. You know, one of our cornerstone habits is having a strong morning routine, morning routine. And for a lot of guys, all the things you really want to get done in the day can be done in those first 30 minutes, right? Like what are the three big things that you could bang off in the first 30 minutes? And so when I say to guys, let's install a good, strong morning routine, initially they do it. They're excited. I'm going to wake up early. But by Thursday, they're exhausted. Like, the motivation is gone. And so you need a system or a habit. And so what is a system? An accountability group, right? So some kind of external thing that is going to help you stick to your goal. What's another system? A reverse alarm clock. What's another, or a habit? We can call it a habit. You leave your phone downstairs. When you go to your bedroom, you don't take your phone into your room, because that's going to lead to the bad habit of doom scrolling and being on YouTube and whatever else you get into on your phone. So instead, we install the habit of having a separate charging station for your phone in another room of the house. Well, Adrian, I use it for my alarm clock. Then we go on Amazon and we buy an alarm clock for $9.99. Like, these are exist. Yeah, that's right. That's right. These are systems you have to install so that we replace the old habit. You know, let's use the phone, taking my phone to bed with me, with a better habit of getting into my bed, writing in my journal, maybe connecting with my wife, and then going to bed. And so the reason habits are so important is because they don't depend necessarily on motivation. They depend on specific, like, things you set up that outlast your enthusiasm. Because as I see with most of the guys in our group, apathy always comes back. The body, when you're trying to change it, will always go back to what it was familiar with. So if staying up late, you know it's bad for you. Like, staying up late, because usually staying up late is coupled with poor sleep, doom scrolling, and food, right? Like, that's typically what happens in the evening. If you are prone to that sort of activity, we have to replace it with a better system. And most guys are cool. They're good, like, for 2 weeks. But then what happens is apathy comes back, and like, I don't really want to go to bed early. I want to do this thing that I was familiar with, even though it's bad for them, right? Even though they're not able to keep off the weight, even though it's killing their energy the next day, but they'll go back to what's familiar. And so you need to set a habit coupled with a system that's going to outlast, your enthusiasm.
Yeah, I've heard you guys speak a little bit about, like, not only a system attached to, like, the morning habit, for example, would be like to set out your things the night before.
Correct.
And to me, that kind of clicked for me. And I've read Atomic Habits myself, and even the whole thing about, like, attach a habit with something you already do, right? Yeah. And I thought that's a good one as well. I'm curious, you in the program, and one of the things that compelled me to check it out was, this isn't just about getting fit. This isn't just about, becoming the skinniest guy you can be, or the strongest guy.
Don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. That's bad.
Yeah.
But it's more holistic around relationships, kids, and your friendships. Can you tell us a little bit in the realm of habits? Can you give us what you think are maybe like 3 habits every guy should consider? I think will look different for every guy, but 3 habits every guy should consider, maybe for themselves, in their relationships with their wife or their girlfriend, and then in their kids. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I would say habit number 1 for a lot of guys is physical fitness. And I would say for a lot of guys, the habit of getting into good shape, not exceptional shape. And what I mean by that is, I've had guests on our podcast and they say, men should be ripped. And that's a debatable question. Like, what should a guy be down at 8% body fat, like really lean, seeing all six abs? Like, you can debate that, I suppose, but I do think men need to be physically fit, especially if you have young kids. If you don't have physical fitness, you cannot keep up with your children. And I don't mean like you see a lot of dads at the park, like we talked about at the beginning, way more engaged, right? They're like running around with their kids, they're playing tag. But as a working busy dad, you have all these demands on your time. Physical fitness gives you the energy you need simply to keep up with the kids. Like, you don't want to be the dad walking in the door at the end of the day and collapsing on the couch and saying to your wife, go cut the lawn, right? Like, you don't want to be that guy. You want to be the dad that comes in the door, says to his wife, hey, I need 15 minutes to myself to just, transition from work mode. And then you're back on, right? From 6 o'clock to your kids go to bed, you are back on. And so I think physical fitness is really important for guys, not to be the skinniest guy or the most ripped guy, but to have the energy your family needs. And then the reason I say fitness is such a gateway is then it requires you to start thinking intentionally about everything else. It starts you to think intentionally about your food. Okay, so like, what kind of food choices are you going to make? And then what that leads to, Jordan, is you have to think about, okay, so if I need to eat healthy to fuel these new workouts, that means I have to prep my meals the night before I go to bed. And so that leads to you then installing a decent evening routine, which then allows you to wake up early and get all these things done in the morning first thing. And so if I were to pick the top 3 habits, I would say they all go together. My top 3 would be installing a daily system where you're getting exercise. If you want to be really specific, I think men should lift weights 3 to 4 times a week. And then on all the other days, walk. And you can build walking into your everyday schedule. You don't need to do hard cardio sessions. What you need to do is just walk. So that's habit number 1. Habit number 2 is a strong morning routine. So you're waking up before your family. If you got kids that wake up at 6 a.m., you got to wake up at 4:30. That's just what it is to be a dad if you've got little kids like you do, Jordan, right? Your kids are little, and so you have to wake up because you can't be finishing your workday at 6 p.m. and saying to your wife, I got to go to the gym. Just can't do it. Right? It doesn't work like that. So so that's habit 2, morning routine. And then I think what most men find is the strong morning routine only works if you have a decent evening routine. So that would be habit number 3. We call it start at night. It's how you power down the last 30 to 60 minutes of the day. And so those 3 habits, a strong evening routine, a decent morning routine, and then some kind of physical fitness. I think if you build your whole situation around those, you will have what you need for your family, especially if you're a really busy dad.
Yeah, I've found that, like, as soon as I start leaning into my health and fitness, which has come in waves over the past couple of years as we've had young kids, it immediately affects everything else. Like, how one example is, like, if I start eating healthy, I save so much more money, right? Like, it just affects, my finances, because sure, we're buying more healthy groceries, but I'm not buying shawarma 5 days a week anymore. So
shawarma's so good. Buy shawarma 1 day a week, okay, though?
Dude, I have trouble staying in 1 day a week, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
Adrian, you had mentioned a couple of times that you're a man of faith, and on one of your recent reels, I noticed that you had lined up some books of just different authors, and you have a stack of books in the frame. And I was just like, I paused the video. I'm like, what's this guy reading? What's he into? And I see some that I like and I appreciate. But I'm curious how you, in your realm, what you're doing, how does your faith intersect with this language of habits, discipline, vision for life? Are they interconnected very deeply for you, or is it kind of like This is my habit life. This is my spiritual life on Sundays.
Yeah.
How does it look for you?
I think you have to treat your faith exactly the same way as you treat your family or your fitness. If you don't schedule it, it's not going to happen. I think a lot of guys are okay scheduling a workout or like an early wake up, but they don't want to schedule things that are more relationally based, like time with my wife or sex. Use that as an example, right? Like if you're a young dad with kids that are young, let's talk about it for just 1 second. Spontaneous sex is the exception. It is not the rule, right? Things happen. It just does. And so you have to schedule everything, relationships with your kids, relationships with your partner, relationships with your God. Those things have to all be in the schedule. Here's a great quote. Show me your schedule. I'll show you your values, right? Show me your schedule. If I looked at most guys' schedules, it's work. Right now, you have to work to make a living. I get it. But work, if I look at your schedule and all I see is work and then the rest is just like free time, then I know you're probably not getting time for anything else. So when we talk, I like the way you phrase the question around how does faith intersect? Just like with my fitness, you have to ritualize your faith. And what I mean by that is you have to build it into the everyday flow of your day so that it's not like random or again dependent on willpower, because that's why people stop reading the Bible in a year after the 5th book. Like there's other stuff, guys, like, but it gets like old, so to speak. So if I were to offer a few opportunities to ritualize your faith, and I don't think you need to make this like revival moments every time. I don't think you have to like experience God in these. Those happen in, I've been a man of faith, I suppose, since birth. My parents are pastors. So, but I've experienced those like mountaintop revival moments, maybe once in my life, maybe when my son was born, maybe, but the rest of the moments are just in the everyday. So if I could offer guys a couple moments of faith in your day, number one, put it into your morning routine, right? So in your morning routine, I went through a season where I listened to the Bible in a year as I emptied the dishwasher every morning, right? So I'd come downstairs, I'd flick my Keurig coffee, the coffee would start, I'd immediately put my AirPods in, and it's called the Bible in a Year podcast. It's this great priest, he just reads the Bible, right? And so in those 10 minutes, as I emptied the dishwasher, because that to me, acts of service are huge parts of my own faith development, and I'm listening to scripture, boom, it's right there. If you're not an audio guy, if you like actually the tactile Bible, what I would suggest, again, a better system than depending on your willpower. I got this from Rick Warren, the Purpose-Driven Life author. He says, leave your Bible open to the passage you're going to read. So, when you come down, it's open. And what Rick Warren actually says, I really love this. He says, read until God speaks, right? So that might be a verse. It might be 2 chapters. You just read until you hear what you needed to hear. So that's moment 1. That's 10 minutes, right? But it's ritualized. I would say, again, I'm a father. So moment number 2 is we always pray with the kids before we drop them off at school. I don't always feel like it, especially, what it's like getting the kids out the door, right? Like, it's not the most spiritual of experiences, but I always, or my wife is really good about this, and she has a ritualized prayer. We pray for courage in our hearts and kindness in our words. She says the same thing, courage in our hearts and kindness in our words. We always pray as we drop them off. A third time we pray is where most people pray, before dinner, right? It's that moment of pause. We like to hold hands. And then the last time we pray in the day is right before the kids go to sleep, So there's 4 moments in the day. Each one takes a couple minutes each. And none of them is like, monumental, right, Jordan? They're all just like little things. Yeah. The same prayer I say with my sons every night. My son always wants me to say these words. We pray that you will keep the bad dreams away and only send good dreams. I've said the same thing for 4 years, and he still wants me to say it. And I don't even have to think. I just say it. It's my presence there. And so I think to make faith stick, you have to ritualize it and then just stick to that same routine. Just like fitness, just like anything worth doing, just build it into the day versus being like, oh, I should really read my Bible today. And what happens is you read like 4 chapters or you read for an hour, and then the next day you don't read. Right. So I think if you can make little moments in the day that become routine, it's way more impactful and lasting than when you again, go for those big, giant mountaintop moments.
Yeah, man, it's so good. I read an author one time. We had him on the podcast, my first interview ever, and looking back, I'm like, oh man, that was so cringy. Looking back at how I did that, but it was Justin Whitmell Early. Have you read his book, Habits of the Household?
Habits of the Household. He was on our. Yeah, we had him on our. He's great, excellent. Yeah.
Oh, did you? Okay, yeah. He's amazing.
Yeah.
And what I like about what I like about one of the things that you guys know is the whole servant leader thing in the morning. And servant leadership of course, we're a Christian ministry. Our example comes from Jesus. And even looking at Jesus beyond servant leadership, I look at how he had spiritual disciplines. Like in the Gospels, you see how he always in the morning, sometimes he would go away from the crowds and he would spend time praying. And I even look at his anger at injustice. And sometimes in the Christian world, we kind of have masculinity over here and the spiritual life over here. And guys don't feel oftentimes that they can relate to their Christian faith in a masculine way because, maybe they've been a part of a small group where felt like kumbaya in a circle, or it felt like really emotional. But from my experience in looking at the person of Jesus, oftentimes when we talk about being a disciplined, a leader, compassionate, vulnerable, you can find that good picture of masculinity in the person of Jesus. Any thoughts around that and spiritual disciplines, servant leadership?
You nailed it on the head when you say that small group can sometimes feel kumbaya, right? This is why our program couples faith with fitness. There are exceptions, of course, and I don't want to make this political in any way, but men are wired to move. And so, however, men are also sensitive. And I think sometimes what we've done is we've said men should be like this and not like this. And I think the best models of ministry that I've experienced, like all those guys I mentioned to you who became friends during my college and careers year, what I didn't mention is we all did triathlon together. All of us. We were all endurance. And so we would go ride our bikes for 80 kilometers. And then and this was something we did, I've lost a bit of this as I've gotten kids, the amount of time I've had. We went around the city and we collected all of these bikes, like random bikes we found. And then we because we knew about bikes, we fixed them up. We painted them yellow. We stenciled the word Yellow Bike Project. And the idea was we were going to leave them all around the city of Guelph where I grew up, and people could just ride them. We got, got kiboshed when we met with like a city official, and they brought the insurance down on us. In our young 20s, in our naivety, we were like, we'll just leave these bikes out. Everyone will love it. But this is how we coupled our our faith identity. And I believe that true faith, let me quote scripture. I might get it a little bit wrong, but true faith is to look after the widows and the orphans, right? That's true religion. True religion is to look after the widow and orphans. And so what I found worked for me and my guy friends was we had this physical thing, our physical fitness, and our biking. And then we gave it, in that case, tangibly. My wife and I run a charity together called Hope's Rise. And what we do is we use running. Again, running is something in my background, as a vehicle to teach kids how to set goals and achieve goals. But this is our faith in action. And I think what happens sometimes is it becomes so passive for guys. Do you know what I mean? It becomes like you listen on Sundays, you go to your home church on Thursdays, and then I'll be crass, you try not to masturbate the rest of the week. That's kind of like how faith can be reduced a little bit. And it's like, wait a minute, the glory of God is man fully alive. One of the early church fathers said that. The glory of God is man fully alive. And so fully alive to me has always been men on mission. For me, mission has always involved tangible acts of service, like the bikes, like Hope's Rise, our charity, taking my kids to Walmart to buy the snack for charity. That's the most faithful thing I think I do in the week. We pray with them for sure, but I think what I really want to model for my kids is, look, boys, this is how we serve the world. This is what it means to have faith in action. And I think my favorite verse of scripture in the whole Bible is during the Last Supper, right? And at the Last Supper, this is the moment that the Israelites have been waiting for centuries. They've been waiting for their Savior. They've been waiting for the Messiah. They've been waiting. What's he going to do? And there's this line that said, the hour had come. You know that line? The hour had come. The hour had come. And I'm reminded of that like Eminem song, like if you had just one chance, like one opportunity, right? And in this moment, it says the hour had come, and it's like Jesus is going to save the people. Jesus is going to show them what it means to be a follower of Christ. And he washes their feet, right? Like that's what happens in the moment. The hour had come, and what does he do? He serves. He washes their feet. He could have, he could have done anything. He could have, and they expected him to overthrow the Roman Empire because they were under rule. They expected him to be like a military leader, and he didn't. In the moment when the hour had come, I think the language is, he took off a cloth and began to wash their feet. And it's this beautiful message to me. And whether you land on the Christian faith or not, I think the best type of leadership is when the leader is willing to do the things that he is asking of everybody else. And so if I'm asking my kids and my wife and the guys in our group to live in such a way that would glorify God, then I have to be willing to serve as well. That's why I do the dishwasher, man. It's a silly thing, right? I do other things in the day, but it grounds myself. First thing, I empty the dishwasher. I'm like, this is who I am. This is me becoming like Christ.
And makes a huge difference. Let's be honest. Like, there's nothing worse than doing dinner and being like, "Oh, we forgot to empty the dishwasher."
If you can attach, and another system I would suggest is attach massive significance to the smallest things. Emptying the dishwasher is not emptying the dishwasher. Emptying the dishwasher is becoming a servant leader. Doing the after dinner dishes is not doing after dinner dishes. It's providing a respite for your wife who's had an exhausting day. If you can attach massive significance, me going to the gym, Jordan, is not me like trying to get ripped. It's me ensuring that I will not become a burden for my family in the future. Now that I could get sick. I could get sick. Those things do happen. However, me going to the gym now sets up the likelihood that I won't be a burden for my family in the future. And so when you can attach massive significance, I think it really helps on those things that just seem like chores, so to speak.
No, that's so good. The reminder that actually what you're doing is not just a habit, right? It's pointing you towards that vision that you have outlined. And I think
it's an identity, right? It's an identity.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think so many guys need to start with that vision. And, if we were to look at a guy maybe that's listening and he's wanting to just hit reset in an area of our lives, I saw last night actually on your Instagram, you had mentioned you're at a soccer game and things hit the fan, let's just say. Can you tell us a little bit about that? But I'm thinking about men that maybe hit that wall and say, I need to change.
So what I saw at my son's soccer game last night was, the game was getting out of control and the ref, should have made some different calls, 100%. But the dads on our side and on the other side were just losing it, just like losing their composure. And it escalated so much that it ended up in like a big pushing and shoving match between the coaches. My son, other kids on the team are crying. And then I was trying to get over to the other side, Jordan, so I could get my kid out of that mess of like grown men shoving. And there were other fathers like almost like going at the ref, yelling like, you caused this, you started this. And as I reflected on it, the narrative will become that the ref messed up. The ref, the ref should have made better choices. I'm not disagreeing with that. And that these grown men could not emotionally regulate was really disappointing to me. I think emotional regulation, in front of the kids as well.
Yeah.
I think my wife's a therapist, my sister-in-law's a therapist. They say that, one of the best predictors of future success is emotional regulation. You have to be able to emotionally regulate. So I'll give you an example. Let's use food as an example, right? A lot of people get stressed in their day. So they experience this trigger, like something outside them that triggers them. They had a busy day, a stressful day. So they're driving home past McDonald's and it's like that stress itches. It's like, I need that. And so you give in to the itch, you scratch it and you go buy the Big Mac. Then you feel shame. We've talked about shame a little bit, or you feel bad about yourself. You can't, sometimes when you're stuck in that spiral, you can't get yourself out of shame. So you do shame yourself. The self-talk is like, oh my God, I did it again. And then what you do is you try to justify it. well, I had a busy day. Like, well, it was a hard day. And what I would want to say to guys who experience those triggers, whether it be like the bad ref or, the golden arches or, looking at something on your phone, pause. This is what cognitive therapy is all about. Can you pause for just a second and ask yourself, why am I feeling this right now? Okay, what do I need to do to get myself out of this moment? And what I saw last night, or what I see with guys who struggle with breaking bad habits, is they struggle to lengthen the pause from trigger to reaction. Right? If those dads had said, "Hey, coach, could we just pause the game for like walked over to the coach and said, coach, could we pause just for a second? This is getting really." If we had done it in a logical way, it could have de-escalated the situation. Same with your kids. How many guys have been triggered by, just before you and I recorded, I told you my son was having like a tantrum, right? And because I've trained myself, I sent you a text saying, "Hey man, I'll be 5 minutes." And you were like, "Cool, I get it." And that was it. It didn't have to be like me yelling at my kid, "Daddy has a commitment. Like, you're always interrupting me." Or maybe you get triggered in your relationship, or you get triggered by news, another article that sets you off. And if you can just pause for a second and ask yourself, what am I saying to myself right now? And there's some strategies you can use to replace those emotional reactions with more logical, calculated ones. Then you could de-escalate a lot of this stuff. You wouldn't be a slave to your emotions, so to speak. And I think when you're not a slave to your emotions, you become truly free. That's what I think.
It's brilliant, man. And that whole McDonald's narrative that you told, that resonates so much. You're reading my mail a little bit. I remember having to like choose a different route home to avoid that restaurant that like just pulled me in every time.
Yeah, but Jordan, that's a system, right? That's a system, right? Your goal, I don't want to ever eat McDonald's again. That'll fail because that food smells so friggin' good and it's so delicious. A system is I'm taking a different route home. That's a system. That's how you do it.
Yeah. And what I loved just before this, talking about, the community of brothers that you had that were on mission together, making these, finding or / thieving these bikes around town and then painting them yellow. No, I'm just kidding. You didn't thieve them, but
we definitely thieved them.
Yeah, you didn't steal them. But what I love about Men of Bedrock and what you guys are doing is that it's based in community, and especially men trying to do anything alone is like 10x harder, I would imagine. And you had mentioned the eulogy thing and like writing a eulogy. One of the things that I also try and do, I did a couple times, is write the 4 to 6 guys that will carry my casket. Right.
That's
and
great.
So along
That's
with
great.
the eulogy of the man that I want to be, who's going to be the guys that kind of carry me there type thing. What role, as we kind of bring this to a close, what role does having guys around you in, starting fresh, saying goodbye to some of these bad habits, wanting to be the leader that you be and achieve that vision that you believe God's given you to be, what role does having guys around you really have?
Yeah, I would say if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This is one of the mantras in our group. If you want to go fast, go alone, because you can start. Anyone can start. That's why the gym is packed in January, right? If you want to go far, you have to go together. I think part of it is some of the things we've talked about. Apathy will always come back. You will always come back to what's comfortable. You know what I don't like online? You see that like inner B narrative, like don't listen to the inner B, that stuff. And I don't, I never resonated with that. It's so shame-based. Like, it's so shame-based. And what I resonated more with was the idea of the outer brother rather than the inner, the outer brother. Yeah. And the reason my brother and I, Vince, got this is, it was a cold winter day. He used to have a gym in his basement. And I remember we would lift, I'd have to be at his house by 4:55 because we'd have to start lifting by 5. And I remember this cold winter day, like the glass pane of his basement is all foggy. And I looked into his like house and I could see he was kind of like moving, but wasn't really ready. And I like banged on the glass. Like I banged on the window glass and he like popped right up. And from outside the house, I called him up. I think accountability is often reduced to like, I want people to call me out on my stuff. That can work, right? Guys have to hold you accountable. But I think what brotherhood does, journeying in community does, is it calls you up. It's like me banging on your window saying, Jordan, time to lift. Jordan, time to rise. Jordan, time to be fully alive. And I think that's what community does. It gets you out of like, it just raises you up. I like that quote, rising tides raise all ships. I like that as well.
Yeah.
But I think really what community does is it raises the standard, right? You see these other guys, and some guys get threatened by that. I imagine, to be brutally honest, I'm threatening to some dads on the street, right? And so, I just imagine I am, because I'm really engaged with my kids and I'm always running around. Right. And, what am I going to do? Lower my standards so they don't feel threatened? No, I keep the standard up so that it raises them. And when they want to rise, I'm going to journey with them. And so I think what community does, calls you up. The best image of community I've ever had is from Lord of the Rings. I don't know if you watch Lord of the Rings. And in the final one, when Frodo is like broken and he's like, I can't, like he's just like, he's totally lost in the darkness. And Sam says, his comrade says, I can't carry the ring for you, but I can carry you. And he's like, picks him up, puts him on his shoulders and carries them up Mount Doom. And, makes me a nerd bomber for having watched that so many times. But it's a beautiful image of what brotherhood is, right? It's like, I know, man, you have to carry these burdens yourself. You have to still get to the gym. You still have to wake up early. You have to apologize when you have conflict with your wife, but I can carry you. I can be there for you. You can do it by yourself, and I think you'll last for a while. In community, I think you'll last, I'm hesitant to say the word forever, but certainly for a lot longer.
Yeah. And that's where I think Men of Bedrock and communities like what you've got going on are so important right now, because, guys aren't just like going to social spaces any longer. I found some of my best friends that helped me become kind of who I want to be at the jiu-jitsu gym, because we were tirelessly like wrestling one another and competing together. And so for me, that was actually a real good example of how the community that's formed when you're venturing through something difficult together. I'm curious, Adrian, if you can tell us a little bit more about what you guys do at Men of Bedrock, how people can find you, and perhaps there's a guy looking for a community of this sort, and how can they reach out to you and find out more?
Yeah, thank you. You can find us on Instagram at Men of Bedrock or menofbedrock.com. A great free resource would be if you go to menofbedrock.com/habits, or just, it's in the bio of our Instagram. There's a great tutorial on how to become consistently good. This is one of the things that a lot of the guys know, is that they can be great for a while, but they want to be good forever. And, consistent, the equation we like to say is consistently good times years equals extraordinary life. And so that requires consistently putting in the time. And so there's a great free training people could take a look at. We are currently closed, unfortunately, for enrollment. We like to journey together, Jordan. We like the guys to start together and then journey through this whole process together. We think that's more powerful than if a guy joins, another fitness community and kind of gets lost in a Facebook group or a large Kajabi portal. And so we reopen mid-September. I don't know when people will listen to this, but mid-September is when we start again. And if people are interested in journeying with us, they can join our wait list on our Instagram page or at menofbedrock.com, and you'll be notified as soon as we reopen. It's always been the vision of my brother and I that we wouldn't just have guys joining at random times, that it would be like the first day of school. And we're like, all right, are we ready? Is everybody ready? Let's go. And, it's allowed us to have a really high retention rate or a renewal rate, because guys find community. They're not just, it's not a program. They're purchasing a whole experience together. Really love this work. I would say, I was on the phone with one of the guys yesterday. He said to me, Adrian, this thing changed my life. Number one, he lost 100 pounds, but it's just, he's restored his marriage, started a new career path. He's leading his kids. And he says, it's because I did this thing. I've journeyed for a whole year. And now he actually said, is there an opportunity for me to coach in the program? And to me, it was like, wow, that was really amazing. So yeah, menofbedrock.com or Men of Bedrock on Instagram. So where you can find more.
Awesome, man. Adrian, thanks so much for just getting, first of all, your friendship and getting to know you, but just especially for jumping on the podcast today. This has been awesome.
Yeah, been a pleasure. Thank you, Jordan.
Thanks so much.